watching Newsnight with Andrew Mwenda. Andrew, the old man of the clan, CEO of The Independent. Good to see you. Last time I saw you were in Kigali, Rwanda.
Somebody asked, how did you fly from Kigali in 15 minutes to host the show here?
Yes, we did a link for Rwanda, and people forget that we had recorded this show the day before, so we could both be in Kigali for these celebrations. Andrew, let me ask. The president mentions, and he specifically mentions the 13 attacks over the last weekend, and the death toll has skyrocketed to 90. What really happened? You have sources in the army, and you have very close ties with some of the people that should have this information.
Yes, okay, at least the current intelligence report suggests that people or youth, disgruntled youth, allied to Obusinga movement in Kasese, or what you would call Rwenzururu, are trying to revive the Rwenzururu movement and trying to create a cultural institution there. You see, remember that in that is a highly multi-ethnic area. You have the Banyabindi, you have the Bakonjo, you have the Basongora, you have the Batuku, you have the Bamba, you have, of course, the Batoro. All of them living together in that same community. Now, the majority or dominant ethnic group are the Bakonjo, who want to create Obusinga. And these disgruntled youth want to enforce this cultural institution on these other groups who are non-Bakonjo. And that's why you see, like in Kasese, they were targeting largely the Basongora community, who are non-Bakonjo, and they want to subdue them. Now, of course, as you can clearly see, this movement struggle is going to be dead on arrival. I do not know whether they appreciate the fact that the security capabilities of the state of Uganda now are so high that the only result they can have is being crushed.
But how could we have not seen this coming? The last communication we had with one of the members of parliament in that area here on Sunday was that there were meetings being held in broad daylight with some of the cultural leaders and young men in those districts discussing how they would actually execute this well-coordinated plan. This clearly had somebody at the helm who was giving orders.
So we could say there was either perhaps not a failure of intelligence, because there are two things.
Failure of intelligence,
there is
yes.
There is your ability to get intelligence,
yes.
B, the ability to correctly interpret intelligence, and 3, the ability to operationalize intelligence. Now I'll give you an example. When the NRA took over Nakasero here, they were surprised to find that the Milton Obote government had all the details of the plans of the 7 people when they were in the bush. And in military terms, if anybody had that amount of intelligence about the enemy, they would have crushed them. The Obote government did not operationalize that intelligence.
So they did not understand the intelligence.
Right now, we do not know whether the Ugandan intelligence services had that intelligence.
Yes.
That's why they do not know. If they had it, then it means they failed to interpret it correctly. And if they interpreted it correctly, then they failed to operationalize it in order to stop the movement, the attacks from happening. Because you realize, I'll give you an example. Kale Kayihura has built a very effective intelligence infrastructure here in Kampala. If you see one demonstration led by Besigye and Lukwago here in town, you know that 9 have been thwarted or killed in the bad. That shows that there is a high level of 3 things. The ability to gather intelligence, which comes from infiltrating and penetrating deep inside the organizers of these demonstrations. 2, the ability to interpret that information correctly, and then 3, to operationalize that intelligence and ensure that you are able to stop something bad from happening. In the case of Kasese and Bwamba, if there was this intelligence, because these meetings are not held necessarily in secret. Many people are talking about the fact that there had been these meetings of the youth. How come that intelligence was not operationalized? I personally have this sense that the police, which is right now the leading institution in intelligence, it has overtaken CMI, it has overtaken ISO, has been so concerned about the terror threat that was happening here in Kampala. Remember, there was a huge fear that there was going to be a terrorist attack on Entebbe Airport and shopping malls in Kampala.
Yes.
In intelligence terms, I should tell you, Maurice, that could have been just a decoy. If you were a good planner in Kasese, the first thing you need to do is to distract the attention of intelligence. You can create a rumor that there is going to be a terrorist attack in Kampala.
But you're giving them too much credit for actually claiming a terrorist attack at the airport and then attacking innocent installations.
You don't think that's sophisticated?
No, you're giving them too much credit. But
why do you think they
maybe,
don't deserve any credit?
Maybe that actually leads us to my next question. Is this really, really a tribal clash? Is this really something about the Rwenzori region, or is it something bigger? And by bigger, I mean, are we actually saying ADF, who, as you've just said, using a decoy, have decided to rally along one of the clashes that happened in the region, and you know, some tension simmering in the region over tribe and ethnicity, and use that for us to actually claim it's a tribal clash, and probably
well,
actually
I think
ADF
this way, it doesn't have to be actually mutually exclusive, because the people. How was ADF formed? You know that there used to be have very deep sources inside the ADF.
Yes.
If there is anybody who has informed the government of Uganda about ADF and its history,
Yes.
more than me, I don't think it exists.
So
now,
help us
ADF was
understand.
formed by three
Yes.
elements. There was the Nalu movement, which was pro-UPC,
Yes.
led by Amon Bazira. When he was killed, he was taken over by a guy called Amos Muhindo. Then there was the second movement, which was the Rwenzururu under Kisokera Nyo, after they had killed Kinyamusto. Kisokera Nyo was the leader of Rwenzururu. And then there was the Tabligh sect of the Muslims. Those three were flushed out of Uganda, and they went to Congo in Bunia, were organized by Mobutu's forces to create the Allied Democratic Forces formed of those three people, those three groups. Now, these Allied Democratic Forces, A, have a historical Rwenzururu movement as a component. Two, they have a Muslim extremist component, and the other three, which could be secular and much more nationalistic, would be the Nalu movement. But these other two have links. So the ADF is part of the Rwenzururu movement, or the Rwenzururu movement is in collaboration with ADF. So when you see that attack, do not separate ADF from the Rwenzururu movement. It is one and the same. And if there was a terrorist attack here in Kampala, if it's not coordinated by Al-Shabaab, Al-Shabaab would be working through ADF. ADF terrorists are trained by Al-Shabaab in Somalia. Did you know?
And there's a
Just
linkage
like
now between
Haram,
ADF and Al-Shabaab.
So don't
and
think
Boko
that-
Haram. Actually,
yes.
the latest information we have is that the information they found when they hit the camps of the ADF in eastern Congo was that there was some communication between ADF and Boko Haram.
Well, you should know that the Al-Shabaab, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, ADF, and so many other terrorist organizations train together in Somalia. And the people who trained them, some of them have come from Afghanistan, some of them have come from Yemen.
Yeah.
So remember that international terrorism also has a central organization. It is very possible. By the way, you see, one of the things in warfare they tell you, even if you are fighting terrorism, is the psychology of the war. And that matter of psychology refers to never underestimate your opponent. The enemy could never allow your prejudices, like your prejudice against them, you think they're just a primitive group. Never allow your prejudices about the enemy to blind your judgment, to color your judgment about that enemy, because the enemy could be smarter than you think. Let me tell you, it is possible that if I want to launch an attack in Western Uganda, I first raise an alarm in Kampala. It's possible for ADF to launch an alarm in Kampala, leak intelligence deliberately or security information to the security services that are going to attack Entebbe airport. We are going to attack shopping malls in Kampala. All security focus comes onto Kampala. But that means you are having a blind spot in Western Uganda. So they attack you from where you least expect. Now, this is the security leak that there is going to be an attack on Entebbe airport is what they call a decoy.
Yes.
It is meant to divert your security attention and your security focus, so they can attack a target where your eyes are not.
So you, like many, do not doubt or do not rule out the ADF factor.
An old man of my age with a lot of experience with ADF. Remember that some of the top leaders with ADF were friends to me, or for that matter, there were people I used to relate to when I was a journalist at Monitor, reporting on them. I found that although we have this normal idea that ADF is a loose organization with the serious thinking people, I found that ADF people were very, very, very smart, and they could plan. One day, perhaps you should do an interview, we should do a show here, and explain to you how an ADF commander here in Kampala, whom I was supposed to have a meeting with, outmaneuvered the intelligence services who were planning to arrest all of us, including me, in a treason soup.
Yes.
But the guy was able to conduct the operation in such a way that I met him and he walked away and the intelligence people could not grab him.
I know that Aronda did speak to us, a couple of us, and said the notes they found in Kasese after the attack, I think, on Mukula, are being used now, I think, at the senior officers' mess for strategy on the battlefield. But that is another discussion for another day. Andrew will come to that. We really have run out of time. Well, that was Newsnight.